morning. We will now call this work session to order. And I want to just start. We, at our strategic planning meeting back in November, came up with our Who We Are statement as the Polk County Leadership and Governance Team, and decided that we would read that to start all of our work sessions and board meetings. So, we are the Polk County Leadership and Governance Team. If we were to pick one phrase to define us, it would be student-centered, because when we come together to work, we lean on our diverse backgrounds and experience to ensure that our decisions are focused on providing a high-quality education for all students. The four most important things to our governance team are operating with integrity, respecting our students, staff, families, and each other, establishing a culture where our stakeholders feel valued, supported, and have opportunities for personal and professional growth, supporting an approach of continuous improvement to ensure student outcomes. Collectively, we need to work on behalf of the children we serve and find avenues of agreement so that we can govern the district in an effective manner. There is no acceptable alternative. We will always collaborate in a respectful manner in order to enhance opportunities for each student and staff member. We will not disparage others. Our students will thrive because we will remain committed to supporting the whole child. We hope to engage and empower our students and stakeholders to create a community of lifelong learners. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to Superintendent Hyde.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, members of the board, members of staff, and community, thank you for being here today. We will begin this afternoon, with the Superintendent's Report. And at this time, Ms. Carol Matthews will provide us and the board a summary of our internal funds audit.
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. Jennifer Christensen with Carr, Riggs & Ingram is here to present the results of the 2020-2021 internal funds audit. As she's making her way up here, the audit is required by statute, and she and her firm have done this audit for the past 8 years of 100% of the schools. So I will turn it over to Jennifer and let her walk you through the audit results.
Thank you, Carol. And is the PowerPoint does everybody have access to the PowerPoint?
Yes, the PowerPoint presentation that she's going to go over is attached to the board docs item.
It's also there for you to present.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So you have control of the PowerPoint.
Yep,
there.
I do. Okay, I was just waiting for it to pop up on the screen. Thank you. As Carol mentioned, we audited the internal funds. And so I always like to just start off with a little background of the internal funds. And these are the monies that the students are raising at the schools. And so this includes the admission events, it includes fundraisers, field trips. And so, so that you have an idea of what kind of the sources of these revenues and expenses. None of this would be state money or grants. This is all money that's raised within the schools. And so this year we went ahead and did a presentation on this PowerPoint to give you a summary of the audit versus kind of going through the 300-page book that we give you each year. So if we get started, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a summary of the financial statements, and then we'll talk about some of the recommendations that we had for the schools, the school findings, and then we had a couple of recommendations for the district. So if you look here, this year, one thing that changed is that we implemented a new accounting standard. And so with that accounting standard, what happened was these internal funds were considered fiduciary activities. And so if you look down here at the financial statements, you'll see we have total assets and total liabilities, but then the third line, we have, this year, it's now called net position. The difference between our assets and our liabilities is called net position, similar to a fund balance or an equity position, where last year it was classified under the old accounting standards as a liability called internal accounts payable. So it just basically moved a little bit down on the balance sheet. But if you look at the numbers, you could see that the total assets are fairly comparable to last year, and the liabilities are going to be pretty small compared to the rest of the volume of the activity. But looking at the additions, or last year it was called revenues, and that's why I have both names here, you could see that the revenues went from about $10 million to a little over $6 million. And that's going to be due to, again, the nature of the activities. Once COVID hit, so in the year ending June 30th, 2020, we had about a quarter of the year where there was very little activity once March hit. And then for the 2021 school year, the activity would have been a lot lower throughout the entire year. So, there weren't any field trips. The fundraisers, we still had fundraisers, but the volume of the fundraisers may have gone down a little bit. Admission events, there was limited capacity. Some sports that may not have had sold as many tickets, or may not have even sold tickets. And so you can see that's a direct effect from COVID and the limited activities that the schools were allowed to have. Now, one thing to point out with internal funds, a lot of times the money is raised for a purpose and it's spent. It's raised maybe for a sports team, for a class, a club, and then they turn around and spend the money. So if you look at 2020, the revenue was $10 million and the expenses were $10 million, and that's what we would expect. You raise the money and then you spend it in the same year. So even though the revenue decreased in 2021, you see the expenses also decreased by the same amount. So that is all in line with what our expectations would be with the schools, even though there are some uncertainties when it comes to COVID and the effects on the financials. What we do know is with internal accounts, if you don't raise the money, you pretty much don't spend it. So it stays in line, and because of that, that's why our assets stayed at about $10.5 million. And at the bottom, I just have as Carol had mentioned, it is a requirement to have an annual audit of the internal funds. And so I just went ahead and put that there, the reference to the requirement. As far as the financial statements, our report was unmodified. As far as, when we audit the financial statements, we're opining on whether they're materially stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and they were, so we didn't have any issues there. And during the year, as I mentioned, we implemented GASB 84, and so there is a paragraph that was added to the report just to let the reader know that that accounting standard had been implemented. And so, again, there was a liability in the prior year of $10,492,000 that then moved down into the equity section, or the net position section. And then as far as the footnotes, we do have to disclose, these were just some of the more maybe sensitive footnotes that we had. Investments, if we have any types of concentrations of one type of investment, we have to disclose that. And so the corporate notes that are held consisted, that made up 6.9% of the investments held by the internal funds. And also the uncertainties, as I mentioned before with COVID, we know as each year goes, there could be an effect on the internal funds, and that continues to be true. We had that in last year's financial statements, this year's, and hopefully not next year's, but there is something in there just to let the reader know that we're not sure if the activity level could change further from the effects of COVID-19. And also during our audit, we had one journal entry, and that was for a timing difference of the accounts receivable and writing off old accounts receivable, which I know we've had this for a couple years, but this current year is when the district wrote off the accounts receivable. So this should be the last year where we have this timing difference, and then in the future, our numbers should all match. We just had, where for the audit, we had written it off a couple years ago, and then the district wrote it off in the current year that we audited. So we did have that timing difference. A big part of our audit is to go in and test compliance. And so, as Carol mentioned, we did do testing at 100% of the schools. And we went into different areas of revenues and disbursements, and you could see I listed them there. Some of the ones I mentioned before, deposits, fundraisers, admission events, and some of the pre-numbered tickets are some of the areas that we tested during our audit. Next is just a little chart that we do each year to show the average findings per school. And you can see over the years, I'm sorry. I apologize. You could see the average findings per school. I'm not going to be able. I tried. See if I can take a cough drop. Thank you. You can see the average findings per school decreased, which again, with the volume going down, that's what we would have expected during the year. I apologize. So next we have a chart that shows the number of findings and how many schools had those number of findings. So we had 60% of our schools that had 0 findings this year, which is fantastic. As you move down, you could see we had 24% that had 1. And then as you move down, we had 3%, 4 schools that had 5 or more findings. And a lot of times when we find this, it's just maybe a school that had a new financial secretary or something unusual that may have happened at that school that caused them to have more findings than the average. But overall, this is fantastic. 84% of the schools had 1 or less findings, so very impressive. As we continue every year, you know, I kind of say the same thing. We're always impressed with the small number of findings that each school, that the schools have. Next, we went through and just kind of compiled some of the more common findings and the number of times that they occurred. And so you could see here, I apologize, I'm struggling, and almost wonder if I need to reschedule for the next meeting, because I really want to be able to go over these findings with you guys. It's real important to me, and and I'm having trouble here talking.
I mean, probably Jennifer would be best to go over the results
certainly will.
that her firm.
I'm so sorry.
Please stop apologizing.
I can maybe
You're fine.
try
It's fine.
You're
to
fine.
keep
You're
going
fine.
with these.
No, ma'am, I'd rather you not. So what we'll do, board members, is you have this, we'll keep this attached, obviously, but we will revisit this topic and get a summary discussion again at the next board workshop, I believe, which is January 11th, if I recall correctly. So I will make sure that this is added to the agenda, and not to worry. Thank you.
I'm
We've
so
all,
sorry.
trust me, we have all been there, including myself, so.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No,
Thanks,
ma'am,
Jennifer.
you're fine. At this time, I'd like to ask Jason Pitts, Chief of Staff, to please come up front. He will discuss a topic we've been, or provide a final presentation and recommendation to the board based off a prolonged discussion involving a K-8 lease buyback option with PSDS.
Good afternoon. I wanted to introduce Bruce Weber and Lauren Hollander. You've seen them before. I believe this is the 3rd time over the last several months that we have been in front of you. The short presentation that I'm going to go through is just an overview of what we've already presented, with the goal at the end for the board to give us direction on whether to pursue this further in a contract. So the discussion that we have been having with PSDS, which stands for Public School Development Services, is entering into a contract which is a lease to purchase program for a K-8 school located in the Haines City area. And just to kind of go back over the benefits of this arrangement, is that this program would enhance the school board's ability to meet the growth and modernization and deferred maintenance needs. They would facilitate the speed to market with the speed of this project beating projected inflation in building materials and interest rates. This is a not-for-profit structure which allows for a low interest rate, tax-exempt bond, avoidance of ad valorem taxes, sales tax on building materials, as well as providing a declining lease. It allows for Polk County Public Schools to build cash reserves that would enhance our financial strength and flexibility. And PSDS would be used in top-rated and award-winning architects and construction firms. This slide is actually my notes and not what you should be seeing. So I've got my notes here. Just an overview of the project. Again, this is located at Scenic Highway and White Clay Pit Road in Haines City. It's approximately 17 acres in size. It would be an approximate 150,000 square foot building at a cost of approximately $50 million. At this point, we would project about a 1,500 student capacity with gym and athletic fields. And it, again, would be a 30-year declining lease with our option to purchase throughout the program. A little bit about Public School Development Solutions. They're a turnkey solution for school building. They identify and acquire strategically positioned school sites and collaborate with clients to design, finance, permit, build, and maintain modern, safe, energy-efficient, fully amenitized school facilities that meet all state public school regulation and requirements. You know, typically when we decide to build a school, there's three parts of that. There's acquiring the land, then there's the debt structure of that, and then there's all the activities that go along with building the school. And PSDS would have already really done that for us. It takes a big load off of not only our facilities, our finance folks. And because of that, the overview of this project looks like we could potentially open a school in 18 months. Another slide and we've gone over this before. You know, they would provide the site selection, the site acquisition, the permitting, the approvals. They would collaborate with our staff over the next few months to really nail down the design, the capacity, what we wanted to see in this school. They would take care of the civil engineering, the SREF standards compliance. They would provide a gross maximum price guarantee, a guaranteed student station cost cap, again, low-cost tax-exempt bond funding, and zero financial impact until occupancy. So the cost overview for this 30-year lease with a purchase option would be with $2.7 million yearly lease, buyout options throughout 30 years. And if we exercise the buyout in year 28, it would be about $5 million. Part of that $2.7 million includes $50,000 in administrative fees, a $150,000 per year maintenance escrow that would total to $4.5 million over the 30 years for future maintenance expenses. It would also include $2 million in FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. Typically, we have built schools through COPS, which is a certificate of participation lease, or through our sales tax capacity. Those have typically, the time period for those debt is typically between 11 and 18 years. So you can see that this option would give us a lower yearly payment, Over the life of the debt service, it would be about $75 million, but the interest rates are very comparable with what we would get through a COPS or a sales tax bond. So the timeline from here, if the board would direct us to move forward, is we would finalize the contract that we would bring back for board approval. Over the next 3 months, we would work on the collaboration with the program and build design with our curriculum, athletic, fine arts folks. Estimated in month 3, the site prep would start. Month 4, the construction would commence. And then in a year, we would see the FFE delivery during the summer with the goal of 17 to 18 months opening the school. Now, I've gone through that pretty quick. And I don't know if I left out anything that you wanted to add today, but really wanted to answer any board questions.
I'm going to add a little bit to that too, Mr. Pitts, before we transition over to board questions. So to reassure the board, throughout this process, you've asked us to make sure that we're engaging with our staff and any relevant stakeholders who would be able to provide additional information or ask questions that are pertinent to a contract or an option such as this. And so Mr. Pitts has done a fantastic job and very recently brought the whole team back together. And when I say the whole team, I mean everyone who would have a touch point with a K-8 environment. Beth was there, Dan Talbot was there, or Dan Talbot had information he shared with us to make sure that all of the amenities, all of the way the school would be constructed would mirror that of a traditional school setting with all of those assurances. Throughout that discussion, Ms. Jenkins brought up a point of concern initially as to the escrowing. So the escrowing was actually going to start, if I recall correctly, later in the lease agreement, but we moved it up sooner so that there would be additional revenue available. So at year 20, it's safe to assume that either the roof or significant major mechanical systems may have to be retrofitted and or replaced. So that escrow account works in our favor to offset those costs. So we're actually building in our maintenance plan there. Additionally, there were questions that were asked. For example, Ms. Cummings over Fine Arts asked about spaces to ensure that we would have a chorus, an orchestra, an art room, dedicated spaces, and the architects and the team was committed to doing that. Facilities shared their primary concerns were twofold. First concern was could we make sure that anything that's installed in the building replicate or mirror the equipment that we use. For example, door openers, fire pull stations, anything that we may find, soap dispensers, anything that we find that we may have to replace through the normal course of events of a school's life expectancy. One of the things that we do to ensure that we have cost savings and so that there aren't any delays in repairs is all of our trades groups can go out with the same equipment on their trucks to better facilitate repairs and expedite the timeline in which that takes place. So the company provided some assurances that, again, as we move forward, all of those details have to be defined with specification or specificity within the contract. The board, as board members, you also, I'm sorry, there was a second issue that was brought up as it relates to FF&E. FF&E, for everyone in the room, or furniture, specifically refers to furniture, fixtures, and equipment. It's everything from the teacher desk to student desks to smart boards to everything else that's in a classroom that makes a classroom functional for students and for staff. And so there were some initial concerns saying, well, there may not be enough in the budgeted amount here for FF&E, so there was a commitment, again, to revisit as a smaller subcommittee to ensure that those things and the conditions and expectations were met. So board members also asked several questions. For example, if the school district were to engage and enter into this type of lease buyback option, as we take possession towards the end of the contract, are we then responsible to, if there's any code changes, are we responsible for making those revisions? The answer is no. The only time you'd have to make significant revisions to code would be if there was at least 50% or more of the building that was replaced, in which case it's considered more new construction than existing construction. So those are the types of things I think we were able to successfully address. From our perspective, I think Mr. Pitts would agree, the team would agree, there are no major objections at this time to the proposal. We see some benefits. I oversimplify the example from time to time, and what I think I've shared with the board and with staff and with others previously. What attracts me to this process is it does not force us to encumber funds that we can otherwise use over the course of the lease period to address our half-cent sales tax and other schools that are older in other communities. And so we can do two projects simultaneously without overexposing ourselves financially. I think that was the initial intent and the initial interest that drew me to the project, and that's where we are. So Mr. Pitts, I'll turn it back over to you or to the board to ask or address any questions that you may have at this time. Ms. Miller.
Mr. Pitts, thank you. I feel like we've talked about this at length on multiple occasions, and staff has met several times. I just want to also mention that what was attractive about this to me was exactly what Mr. Hyde said. The average age of our schools is 50 years plus, and this will free up money to help with those buildings while we build a new school. So I think this is, once those questions were answered, I too had questions about CTE things and the arts and all of that, and those questions have all been answered, and I think this is it's a new way of doing things. It's something we haven't done, but we're in the business of thinking of new things to help, especially offset costs. So I'm excited to see this project continue. Thank you for presenting.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Yes, I'm going to echo those comments as well. I think that it's important, obviously, as we grow that we have new schools, but we really, as I travel around the district, we have so many schools that have such great need, and we know that the deferred maintenance is a significant challenge for us, and this gives us an opportunity to address that. I think that's incredibly important for us as a district, while simultaneously addressing the growth. And so, at times, you have to be a little bit creative in finding solutions, and I think this is a creative opportunity for us. So I hope we can move forward with this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Fortney?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues, but I just have a couple questions, Mr. Pitts, and I appreciate you taking time always to answer my questions. I'm curious, was this request for the lease purchase bid out competitively? I'm just curious.
It was not.
No, it does not. It does not bid out competitively.
Why?
They will
Can you
take.
explain?
They will take on the ownership of that. I mean, because it is a lease purchase, they will.
Similar to our White Fleet, I guess is what I'm asking.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Because we're
clarify.
not making the actual procurement, we're leasing the facility. At any time within the 30 years, we can simply walk away. The contractor, the non-for-profit organization, is the one assuming that responsibility. And they essentially, and this is part of the contract discussion, I think you raise a valid point, and maybe this is where you were going with this. But whatever criteria or requirements we must follow with ensuring that we prioritize local opportunities and those types of things, they will adhere to. You see them acknowledging that there. It was my understanding that the architect who we met with very recently has been the architect who has successfully worked with us on multiple projects. And so that's exciting to see that level of understanding about Polk County and our Polk County process is embedded in this already, so we're not discussing or debating issues. So that's the why. It doesn't have to be competitively bid.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. Could you name some other districts that have actually contracted with y'all to lease back a school from you? Like, how long and what are the names of the districts, et cetera?
Sure. Hello, sorry. We have done this in a number of districts throughout Florida, but it has been predominantly with charter school operators. And so this will be the first school district to enter into this arrangement with our organization.
Okay, thank you. So I could not reach out to, like, say, Palm Beach County or Volusia? Okay, as far as the public schools.
Well, there may be an answer there for you, actually.
Okay.
If we wanted to follow up with any of those, because if I recall correctly, you've done some construction in Santa Rosa, you've done some construction in other counties. If we wanted to put Ms. Fortney in contact with the school district to ask if they had any concerns with the facilities, could you provide us with that information?
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. That's exactly right.
Yes, ma'am.
And we're looking at just K-8 on 17 acres? Is that our normal footprint, Mr. Pitts?
That is a smaller footprint than what we normally see.
So it is smaller, okay. Let's see, so we would use sales tax opposite of impact fees for maintenance on our older buildings.
We primarily use sales tax for primarily our modernization projects.
Right,
Our impact fees are typically, have to be used for capacity, new capacity.
right.
And we could also, to pay for this, we could also use our LCI, our local capital improvement fund. So we have a couple of options on how we have to pay. One of the nice things about this lease arrangement is if we can't budget it, we're not required to move forward. You know, typically when we enter into a debt arrangement,
Right.
we're locked in.
Correct.
But we have three different areas that which we're a little unsure on the impact fees, honestly.
Okay.
We're still
That's
checking on
kind of my
that.
question.
But we have a couple different options, capital options to pay for this.
And then my last thing is on the student station size itself. How does that compare to our traditional student station size, et cetera?
You know,
Cost and size, both, actually.
I would say this is one of our major concerns when we went into this, and the meeting that we had a month ago was with Harvard Jolly, who has been an architect that we've designed, an architect firm that we've used. And that would still be developed over, you know, as we decide exactly how many students and that sort of thing. But it would be, I want to say it's comparable to what we see. It's a little smaller footprint. I mean, it's going to be a smaller school than what we typically see. It's not
That's
as
my biggest
sprawl.
concern there, yeah.
Yeah, but that would be, again, a collaborative item for discussion with the staff. We would look forward to that. And I would say that you'll see instructional spaces being very similar to what you've done historically.
But probably smaller in general.
The other thing to add is it meets the SREF requirements. And so I think it was approximately, in the presentation, it was approximately 90 to 95 square feet per student, which is in that SREF requirements.
That's it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Ms. Miller?
I just want to add, I mean, I also originally had that concern, but what I thought a positive to this, this project is we see a lot of space at our school, and we want beautiful palm trees and things, but if we are in a time where we cannot build space and adequately support students, we have got to cut and focus on the instructional setting while making it aesthetic, but, you know, really cutting those kinds of things that aren't truly necessary or required. So I want to make sure it's a beautiful school for our students, and the instructional space is the focus. If we can save money by cutting back on the other areas, then I think that's something we're just going to have to start looking at this point with our budget.
And to that point, what I'd like to do, because I also don't want to give people the impression that we're just going to build a warehouse with no windows and, you know, just to save a few dollars. At the
That
last
is
meeting.
not what I was inferring.
No,
Superintendent Howard.
not at all. But it's a great question. When we talk about fish sizes and fish capacity and room sizes have fluctuated so frequently in the 21 years I've been in the state, and we can all imagine in our heads schools or classrooms we've visited, and you're like, wow, this is a huge classroom for this grade level. And then there's others where like, oh my goodness, what were we thinking when we built a school of this size? But we, you know, class size caps and things have fluctuated as well. Demographics and enrollment fluctuations occur. But what I'd like to ask to help address and alleviate any concerns that anyone may have is at the last meeting there was a presentation that showed what the spaces would look and feel like. And I think that's important to bring some of those 3D images forward again. So if you could forward those to Mr. Pitts, and we could get those to the board, and we can post them online for everybody to see, I think that's important, because throughout the process, what we've heard consistently stated is, it's a continually collaborative conversation, that if we have a need and we can express that need, they will do everything they can to accommodate that. So if class sizes are an issue, physical space is an issue, we will work to address that. But again, the whole benefit of the proposal was to maximize efficiencies and find opportunities for us to do things simultaneously and free up some of our funding to do those. So if you wouldn't mind sharing that, I think, I know that wasn't a committed proposal, those were just images from projects that you've been working on or that Architect had worked on, so if there's a willingness to share that,
Yeah, happy
I think
to.
that would help quite a bit.
Yeah, and we don't want to compromise aesthetics either. We will be equally as proud of this school as you will be. And I think the aesthetics that show up in what we share will demonstrate that.
And I think, Ms. Fortney, not to kick the proverbial dead horse here, but if the concern about the property size, so there's two ways to approach this, because we had this conversation at the last meeting. If we're concerned about the size of the property, because the question is, well, where will the portables go when we need them? Then let's own the reality that we're not planning properly. We're not. We need to be more aggressive, and we need to build additional space. And yes, there will be the counter argument where you're building these really large schools and some of the space is going unutilized. But let's be honest, we have schools now that are at below 50% utilization because of rezoning and other factors. So it's a great question to ask. And so I say it from that perspective, but I'll also add the caveat that what the group is committed to is if this physical property doesn't work, there are other physical properties within proximity that we could consider. That are options as well. So if those are concerns moving forward, and that's why the request is to go to contract with them to begin the discussion to finalize details, and we can get final numbers, because as Mr. Pitts said, we have to make sure that the numbers stay within a specified range of the original proposal, because that's what makes it make sense. Absolutely, and capacity, as you stated. Yes, ma'am. Dr. Wu.
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. Yeah, I just appreciate the presentation, Mr. Pitts, very thorough. This has been a pretty, long process, so I really appreciate your time just being around, being accessible as well. And I go back to our conversation on site at Alturas just recently, right? And, you hear, why haven't we given attention to, modernizing and upkeep of that particular school space? So when I think about, an opportunity to innovate, to make sure that we're honoring that promise that we've kept, I think if this is innovative and allows us to fulfill that promise, I'd be in favor of it. So, I did have a couple questions. So when you think about the half-cent sales tax that we do have in that initiative, if that's not renewed in, 15 years, what does that look like? Does that have a dramatic impact on funding this in a sense, and what's any thought process on that? And not to say that wouldn't, at this point, we can't really, create a hypothetical around it, but I would like to, curious if you thought through that. That'd be my first question.
At this point, it would not be my intention to use half-cent sales tax to pay for this. That would not be my intention. But since you brought it up, if we did lose that half-cent sales tax, we would lose half of our capital funding, and it would be a significant loss all over the district. Which we're not going to let that happen, hopefully. But it's not my intention to use half-cent sales tax. We would continue to use the half-cent sales tax for the modernization of our campuses.
Okay, good to hear. And then when we look at that number, the 2 million and the FFE, is that, pretty average, would you say?
In this market, it's hard to tell. We've built a limited number of schools over the last few years. And that was in line with when we built Citrus Ridge. That was about the budget of Citrus Ridge when we built Citrus Ridge.
Okay. And then
For FF&E.
Yeah. I was just thinking on the question on the comment, I think you really helped clarify, Superintendent Hyde, is, what would be some of those projected maintenance costs within a 30-year period on a new construction? So we're looking at maybe 20 years, we'd see like a roof replaced or anything like that. So as I'm looking at that escrow dollar amount, what was the thought and planning and then that number specifically?
You want us to answer that?
Would you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
We went through the building from top to bottom, side to side, and actually created a very detailed schedule based on ours and our partners' decades of experience in construction. So it was built from the ground up. Years were picked very precisely with the input from Superintendent Hyde and our financial team. We actually advanced some of those years forward to make sure that we would be fully funded. So we moved up some of those critical capital projects, and it came out to a little bit less than what's being allocated. So we built into that schedule a little bit of financial wiggle room. If for any reason, or when we think of it as when you take possession of the school, if there's anything left in that escrow account, that comes to you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And we can forward that
Wanna
to you.
add?
It's a very detailed plan. I have the details of that. I can forward to all the
Okay.
board members if you'd like that.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think this is a great opportunity. I've been rereading actually by Stephen Johnson, The Innovator's Cookbook. So whatever we can do to find innovation and for us to be the first school district in Florida, I hope this goes well. And I think us setting the stage for something unique is pretty cool. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Just need consensus.
So we will request consensus to allow us to move forward and enter into a contract discussion. Mr. Bridges, could you walk us through that process?
We have a draft contract in the House that we're looking at right now. At this point, I'm not aware of any reason that we could not enter into such an agreement. We're looking at it very carefully and making sure that the legal provisions, the financial provisions are all in line and that there's nothing there that would give us a statutory or regulatory concern. These entities have had counsel involved for some time who I believe have been careful in constructing the contract to address those things that may be unique to Florida, but I am not aware of anything at this point that would serve as an impediment to keep us from being able to do this if you choose to do it.
Ms. Miller?
Can we talk about the time? This has been a conversation for at least 3 months, 4 months with just the board. Can we talk about a time frame for this? So if there's a concession, after today, what is the next step? And when can we look at a final
So that's what Mr. Pitts
approval?
was outlining previously in the PowerPoint, so you'll walk through.
My
the-
anticipation would be at the end of January, we'd have a contract before you to approve.
I think when Wes starts talking about attorneys being involved, and I thought it was going to get stretched out another 6 months.
No, we were
No
actually,
offense, Wes.
we were a little smarter than that, a little more
Okay.
strategic.
Okay.
We actually began reviewing a draft contract early, and we actually took existing contracts with current developments that we had or we've completed. They brought some. So the language aspect, that's what, we got a head start.
Thank you, because that's what I understood had happened. Mr. Bridges, sometimes I appreciate the explanation, but all I could hear was, we're still looking at this and looking, we're going to keep looking. But I'm glad that we're that far along.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, we've got it in the House. We've met with them several times. And like I said, there's a lot there to unpack. This is something new, but it has been in the works for some time. I'm not aware of any reason why it couldn't be brought to you in January for approval.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson?
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. So we have a contingent contract in place for a land purchase that has to be, we would have to give them notice that we're not going to follow through on that, as I understand it, next month, correct?
Correct.
For the high school.
So this would go simultaneous, that's a high school spite, this would be a K-8.
Okay. So we can do both of those simultaneously?
That is correct, sir.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Bridges, what's the process to ask the board to provide a consensus vote to allow us to move forward?
Well, as we've talked about before, consensus is not a legal thing.
Correct.
If there are a majority of the board present who are favorably disposed towards this and ask it to go forward, we'll go ahead and go forward, and then it'll be brought to the board formally for a vote in January.
Okay. Right.
Yes, consensus is one of those things that gives school board attorneys heebie-jeebies.
Ms.
Yes,
Miller.
ma'am.
I have a question. I appreciate Mr. Wilson bringing that land deal back up, because my question is, are we going to have, we're going to enter into contract per the last conversation, or is that going to come back before us again?
Yeah, we'll still come back before you for approval or further discussion and/or approval or rejection. That site is needed for a high school site. Ms. Usher has done her due diligence, has shopped around for multiple sites. Actually, as we've worked and began communications with several partners within the community, there is some excitement building around the aspect that we could actually put some environmental academy programs at that school in conjunction with our local colleges and universities. So we're going to maximize the opportunities there, but we are in desperate need of a high school in that location or in that proximity to that location.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Wilson.
So, Madam Chair, what we have done traditionally is just a show of hands. And I
Correct.
think, although that may give Mr. Bridges some heebie-jeebies, I think it helps the staff, I think it helps them with their confidence level moving forward.
Yeah, and for clarification, there is no vote. You're not approving a contract. You're approving to allow us to continue the discussion. The contract will come back before the board for an official vote and review in January. But again, for the sake of being transparent, for the sake of being open and receptive, we wanted to make sure that the board, we keep bringing this topic back to you for a reason, so that you have a comfort level with what's being discussed and what's being proposed as we've gone forward incrementally at this time. So, Madam Chair, if you will.
So is everyone present okay with them moving forward to start drafting a contract and contract negotiations? Seeing head nods, yes. So, go ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We can't wait to see you in January.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So as we transition, I'm going to bring Mr. McNaughton forward, our Chief Academic Officer. Also, I will ask that Audrey Kelly Fritz come forward. The next topic on the Superintendent's Report is reproductive health curriculum. It's a review of our current or existing curriculum, including any modifications that were required. This is a required review and approval process before the board. The board is not approving the curriculum this evening or this afternoon. It's simply a review. Ordinarily, this would have been located in the information items section. However, given the nature of the topic, having been a former science teacher and relative newcomer to Polk County, again, for the sake of transparency, I felt the need and requested for the staff to put together a presentation for the board, for the community, to help identify and provide an overview of all of our relevant topics as it relates to this content area. For further clarification, it's interesting that this content lives in two places, depending on the grade level. For example, some of the content resides within the health curriculum at middle school in particular, while also being part of the reproductive health that's instructed by our school nurses in grades 4 through 8. Beyond that, it's taught by traditional teachers, either health teachers or science teachers at the high school level, if I'm correct. So just to give you a little bit of background as to why it's been moved here to allow further discussion and review. Ms. Kelly Fritz.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like to start with an overview, and we're going to go through our PowerPoint. You have a copy of this, so you should be able to see it easily. And I also brought, I just want to say, I brought Jamie Kress with me. She oversees the curriculum and getting the schools scheduled. She also has been a nurse that has taught this for years. And she is a thorough expert in this curriculum. Okay, the first thing we want to talk about is that we have health standards from K through 12 for teaching, of course, health. And part of our process for teaching health is to teach human growth and development. And we begin that context, that education, in grade 4, and it continues all the way through high schools, through the high school. Each one of our curriculum pieces is designed to meet state standards. We have state statute 1003.42, and it requires comprehensive health education, and it incorporates sex education and disease prevention in our education. We have to, are instructed to make sure that we teach the benefits of sexual abstinence as the expected standard and consequences of teenage pregnancy. In addition, we have been given, as a school district, the ability to determine the latitude that we would like to teach these concepts in, based on what the board and what the community feels is necessary. Do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay. Okay. We have an abstinence-based plus model. It is not a total abstinence, you never mention anything else, and we move forward. It emphasizes the benefits of abstinence. It includes information about all non-coital sexual behavior, contraceptive, and disease prevention as well. In grades 4 through 8, registered nurses from health services and school health with the Department of Health deliver content on the human growth and development, on reproductive health, teenage pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, and teen dating violence and abuse. It is specific to grade levels, and not all topics are taught at all grade levels. The HOPE course takes over further education for our high school, where the classroom teacher of the HOPE course delivers the content of human growth and development, reproductive health, teen pregnancy, sexually transmitted diseases, HIV, and teen dating violence and abuse. I'm just going to skip on to the next one. Our program is a district-developed program. It's based on medical models. We have adapted other types of resources into it, including other health textbooks, and we have worked in collaboration with other Florida school districts for the curriculum content. We update it with CDC and medical information yearly, and with information from the Florida Department of Health, as well as the Florida Department of Education in health curriculum. Okay. So now we're going to get to kind of what is in each grade level. So we're going to start with the 4th and 5th grade level. The first thing we do is we're talking about what does it mean to be healthy? Who is responsible for your health? And we also talk about in 4th grade ways to stay healthy. That includes checkups and exercising and nutrition and getting enough sleep. And what does it mean to stay safe? And that's in general. So we wear seat belts. We look both ways when we cross the street, that types of things. Then once we figure out what it means to be healthy, then we go into puberty for boys and puberty for girls. Now, it's really important to understand that 4th and 5th grade, girls and boys are separated for these components, and boys learn about boys and girls learn about girls. So when we discuss that, we're talking about puberty for boys, we go into the puberty component. We're talking about pituitary gland. We're talking about male changes during puberty, ways to take care of yourself. And trust me, all 4th, 5th grade and middle school teachers are very happy. We teach about how to properly take care of yourself and use deodorant. So that's part of the things we teach about. They talk about the male reproductive system with the boys, and they introduce a labeling activity on the anatomy. Girls have the same type of thing, except it's just for girls. They talk about puberty, the pituitary gland. They talk about female changes, that happen during puberty, which include, body hair, increase in oil, your hips grow wider, things like that. And they do a labeling activity with the female reproduction system as well. They also go over ways to self-care, and they go over ways to take care of your menstruation, including how to use a pad and common questions about menstruation. At that point, we also talk about HIV in 4th grade. We introduce it with what's a communicable disease and a non-communicable disease. So flu and strep versus cancer and asthma. One's catchy, one isn't. They talk about germs, virus, and bacteria, and they introduce the immune system. We introduced HIV/AIDS as a label at that point, or as a definition, and we emphasize that there's no vaccine and no cure because it is a virus. We talk about how people get HIV, and in 4th and 5th grade, this means through contact with blood, infected blood, through sharps and needles. So you're taught not to touch them, not to pick up anything, to get help, and not to touch other people's blood. They also are taught that HIV can be spread from mother to baby. It's very quick, and we move on. Most importantly, we talk about how HIV is not spread, and so you're not going to get HIV from hugging someone, being their friend, breathing the same air that they breathe. In 5th grade, we expand on those concepts, and we talk about the endocrine system and the different glands that are part of that of the endocrine system and what they do. We expand in girls' puberty. We expand in boys' puberty as well. They continue to learn about the pituitary gland. They can continue to learn about their body changes, and they also continue to learn how to take care of themselves. And we go over the immune system again. You will see a lot of it repeated over and over, but it's not really repeated verbatim. It is repeated and expounded upon a little bit each year according to their developmental level. So at that point, we introduce HIV/AIDS again, and as part of the immune system. Again, we mentioned there's no vaccine or cure. Again, we mentioned how it is transmitted through infected blood and through you can get it through sharp needles if it has infected blood on it. How to get help for someone who is bleeding so that you are not touching any type of blood, and what to do if you find some types of sharp needle or syringe. And again, we go over how HIV is not spread. In 6th grade, it's a little bit of an expansion in 6th grade because the girls learn about the male anatomy or boy body, and the boys learn about the girl body. They are separated at this point, so boys learn about themselves and the opposite gender, and girls learn about themselves and the opposite gender. So that's an increase. That's kind of how we ramp up a little bit for 6th grade. Again, hitting the pituitary gland, hygiene, their reproductive systems and structures. For girls, we go more into ovulation and menstruation and calculation on a calendar so they can predict their cycle. And that gives them some peace when they're trying to plan for their school days. They also go over the male reproductive system with the girls. They go over the basic reproductive system of girls with the boys, and also include for the boys their own physical changes, their own growth changes, their own hygiene changes, what they need to be doing, and their own male reproductive system again. This is the first year that they introduced fertilization and birth in the 6th grade. And what they do at that point is they introduce that where a sperm is joined with an ovum, and that means the fertilization will take place. They talk about the fallopian tube and how it travels down the fallopian tube. They talk about implantation. They talk about human growth and development in the womb. And at that point, they talk about choices, when the best time to have a baby, to wait to have a baby till you're grown. I'm in a committed relationship, and it shows a picture of a married couple when they talk about that. Is there anything that you would like to add about that?
Thank you. It's important that we emphasize prenatal care even as early as that, and emphasize how it's important to take care of your bodies always. So we're always emphasizing taking care of the bodies and why it's very important for the development of the baby to take care of their bodies and not to do risky behaviors associated with that. So we do emphasize that as well.
At that point, we also expand on our HIV/AIDS education that we provided in the prior years. We go over again communicable versus non-communicable diseases, including germs versus viruses versus bacteria. We do a review of the immune system. We talk about vaccinations. We talk about HIV and the 3 stages of HIV and how it is transmitted. At this point, they deal with it being transmitted in 3 ways: through contaminated blood, through sexual contact, which is not expounded upon, but it is mentioned, and through mother-to-baby transmission, and how it is not transmitted. Abstinence is always stressed as a way to avoid, any type of problem that you may have, any type of STD, and any type of problem that you would have. It's also abstinence on all fronts in the 6th grade. Abstinence from drug use, abstinence from sexual contact, abstinence overall and in general. Right, okay. Moving on to the 7th grade, and I'm so sorry if I'm taking up too much time. Please let me know and say, hey, speed it up, and we will. But moving on to 7th grade, we talk a lot about reproductive systems and puberty again. We give a brief overview, because we have now dealt with that in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. This should all be review for them. We go over structures for both male and female again. We talk about STDs, and we identify STDs by definition and STIs, which is sexually transmitted illnesses. We go over STDs statistics for them, and we start introducing different types of STDs and STIs, including chlamydia, gonorrhea, so that they know what their names are and what they look like on the skin, and so that they can identify them in the future if they ever so need to, or know that something's not right if they ever so need to. We also go over symptoms of these illnesses and possible treatments for them. Moving on to HIV/AIDS, we talk about how we test their memory to see if what they remember about what we've already discussed about HIV. We go over HIV stats again. We talk about the T cells and how HIV attacks the T cells. We go over the stages again, how it is spread, ways to resist peer pressure to have sex. We talk about abstinence again. Every time we talk about abstinence, always, because abstinence is the expected standard. We also talk them to seek treatment if they need it, to tell their parents if they need something. We give them hotline numbers. We tell them to, and we also give them the Department of Health numbers should they need that. Moving on to 8th grade. We go over the reproductive system again, male and female, including fertilization. And we also talked, this is where we introduce the consequences of pregnancy. So in 7th and 6th grade, we introduced fertilization. In 7th grade, we introduced STDs and STIs. And in 8th grade, we introduced teen pregnancy and the consequences of teen pregnancy. So when doing so with the consequences of teen pregnancy, we asked them to write down their life goals. What do they want to do and what do they want to be? And then at that point, we start talking about teen pregnancy. And we give them stats on that. We talk about relationship myths that they may have heard. For example, kids think, oh, my education wouldn't be affected. I'll have plenty of money. The person who is with me now will always be with me and will love me more. The baby will love me. If no one else does, the baby will. All of those, and a baby would make me happy. Those types of myths, we go over each one and we make sure they have the truth about those. We talk about teen pregnancy, how it affects them, how it affects the partner, and how it affects the unborn child, that there's some effects, and how it affects the mother and father of the teen parent. So we talk about aspects of all of those things. We talk about how expensive a newborn is, and they have a newborn expense exercise so they can see just how much money it takes to raise a child these days. The life goal is then revisited because they say, okay, this is what you want to do. It's going to be, how do you see yourself if a teenage pregnancy came into play? And then so it starts them thinking like, okay, this is where I want to go, and this could kind of circumvent me some other direction. So, and that is also that they can know that this is harder if this were to happen. We talk about pregnancy. We talk about them talking to their parents, a counselor, or someone that they trust if they feel that they are pregnant, or if someone else is hiding a pregnancy, because sometimes that may happen. We also give them safe haven for newborn information so that they know that they can reach out to another group if they need to. Then we go into STDs, HIV, and AIDS. We talk about all the things we talked about before. We talk about long-term consequences of STDs. We talk about the different types of STDs. We talk about abstinence, again, always abstinence, stressing that abstinence is the expected standard and is the best option for them. They have enough to worry about being in middle and high school without worrying about one more thing. They talk about symptoms and treatments and resources. At the end, there is an activity. The activity is basically so that we know that they know what they're talking about. They've gotten the idea of the lesson. It's our basically way to test them, even though it's not a test. Where they're the doctor, and we give them scenarios, and they have to be the doctor, and based on what is presenting, they have to determine what type of STD that person may be infected with, or what's going on with that person. And that's done in a group context, so they divide into groups to do that. At this point, we introduced teen dating violence and abuse and human trafficking. This is done in 7th grade. But in 7th grade, it's taken care of through one of the health classes that we have that is called one of our mental health classes in middle school. It should be going on right now, as a matter of fact, in December. That's part of our teen dating violence and human trafficking section. We took it on originally because it was an easy fit. We got, at the last minute, something that said, you will be teaching dating violence prevention. It wasn't human trafficking at that point yet. But dating violence prevention this coming up year, and you're going to be teaching it to all 7th, 8th, and high school students. And we had a group of 15, well, there were 12 at that point, 12 dedicated nurses. And we thought, this dovetails. They can do this. And then we've got it taken care of, and we move forward. And that's what we did. In the meantime, since then, we've kind of adjusted some of that, and our 7th grade teachers have taken on the first component of teenage dating violence and human trafficking. That was added, I want to say, a couple years ago. And but we pick it up back in 8th grade. And in 8th grade, we talk about the definition of dating violence. We talk about healthy relationship and what they should look like, what they should feel like. We talk about types of abuse, the different types, so mental, physical, emotional. We talk about the abuse cycle. We share stats. We share recognizing abuse symptoms, recognizing abuse triggers. We talk about why abusers abuse. And this will also continues into the not just the 8th grade, that goes into the HOPE course as well. So you will see a repeat in the HOPE course taught by teachers. How to stop teen dating violence. Like I said, examples of healthy relationships. We talk about human trafficking, the definition, the signs, safety to prevent trafficking in the first place. And we give them resource numbers as well for human trafficking. And then we move on to our high school curriculum. Our high school curriculum is conducted through our HOPE class. And we provide, or this year our plan is to provide the educational materials for them to be able to do this. In the past, it has been done by a nurse, and then COVID hit. And so our nurses were pulled to different types of things. We had been training the teachers to take over it, and that was just the dovetail into them actually taking this on. So this year, our hope is that they will again go through male and female body structures. They will go through men's health issues. That's an addition in the high school, that they would go through different types of cancers that men may have, different types of things that may happen to them, as well as female health issues. Pregnancy is again reviewed. It goes from fertilization all the way through the development of the baby. They talk about sonograms, amniocentesis. They talk about physical changes to the mother's body during pregnancy. They talk about teen pregnancy again. More facts about teen pregnancy, problems concerning teen pregnancy, risks to the mother, father, and both, the mother and the father together, risks to the baby of the teen mom, newborn expenses, and that if they feel they're pregnant, they need to talk to an adult, a parent, trusted adult, and we give them safe haven information for newborns. We also talk about STDs and HIV. Again, we do the definitions of STD, sexual contact. We talk about STD diseases, whether they be bacterial or virus. We talk about different types. We go over them again. We talk about HIV at that point. We talk about ways they're spread. We talk about risk behaviors and how to prevent the spread. Lots of times we talk about testing, getting tested for HIV, getting tested for STDs and HIV, as well as local resources. At that point, we also talk about family planning. That's another section. And it begins with the question, why do married couples delay having children? And you're trying to get them to say, oh, things like, and the things we've heard would be like, oh, they don't have the money, financial. They're still in school. They're going to school. They don't feel like they are mature enough. Sure, young couples might be like that. They are, I'm trying to think of another one they say, they want to travel and just spend time together. Sure, all those things. And at that point, that's how we introduce the family planning. And then they go over, in the context of a marital relationship, when you would decide you would want to delay your family at the time, the methods that people may choose, and also their failure rates. So there's natural methods, hormonal methods, mechanical methods that are described, surgical methods, and then methods that don't work. So to make sure that they're aware of those as well. They talk about why contraceptives fail. And again, we talk about abstinence because it is the best choice for our teens. And that is the expected standard of our teens. And again, we go also into, and here they are, human trafficking, as well as teen dating violence. As we've mentioned earlier in the 8th grade, it's just a little bit of an expansion, but mostly it is similar information covered by the statute, which is, that covers teen dating violence and human trafficking. Oh yes, for all of these, there is, and they're like, oh, there's more. No, I'm kidding. For all of these, there is a parent letter that goes out that lets them know that they can be opted out of any of the sexual content that we have. This is sent out a week to 2 weeks before before we come on campus, or before the lessons are given if it's provided in a classroom setting by a teacher. So I wanted to give you can look at that as well. Is there anything that you'd like to add about anything? Okay.
No.
Okay, and do we have any questions now?
So a couple of quick a few other comments before we transition to questions. So met with one of our local parents who expressed several concerns as we posted this. And so I believe we've addressed the majority of those here this evening. There are several areas that are that remain under review, since this will be brought back again in January. It's the inclusion of HIV at grades 4 and 5. that initially began because that was a requirement at those grade levels. Now it's optional. However, there are, again, I will defer to our committee and the recommendations as to why to continue with its inclusion. So that's an ongoing discussion. Also, as you just saw, the parent opt-out. So our district website is being enhanced. On our curriculum page will be a hot link to human growth and development. And then when you click on that link under our curriculum page, it will take you to each grade level link, and all of the content materials that will be approved will be linked there for parents to view and review, as well as providing them with the opt-out forms in all of each of the respective languages. These will be PDF copies of everything. They will not be the PowerPoints. They'll be PDF copies of all PowerPoints for obvious reasons, but that way we can be compliant with the requirements for how we post information on our website and make it available to others. But that should make it easier for families or caregivers to have ready access to the content information for review. Additionally, as a school district, one of the final enhancements we're looking to make is to provide a calendar. And so you heard, depending on the grade level, there are maybe a few topics that are addressed, or there may be multiple topics that are addressed. What we will work to do is develop a calendar that says on this date, this is the topic that's being addressed. So if we're talking about hygiene in particular at the upper grade levels of elementary school going to middle school, it's very appropriate, and I would encourage parents not to opt their child out of hygiene on that day, but there may be other topics that they as a family, based off their personal beliefs, based off their religious beliefs, based off whatever issues that or cause concerns for them, and that's their right, they can opt out of those activities. And so the goal here is to provide a calendar for families that says, here are the topics that are going to be addressed on each subsequent day. Please consider each. Here are the materials that you'll see. Yes, we use all of the appropriate language and terminology. We use everything that's appropriate for instruction, and many of those terms are new, but far better to use than slang or common terminology that students may refer to body parts or other actions with. So that's where we're going as a district, because again, our effort is, our interest is to ensure that all of our families have ready access to this information, and that is a requirement as well. So I believe I'll turn it over now to any questions that you may have, but this topic will come back before the board in January. Ms. Forney.
Well, as the science teacher in most of these grades, I was the class that got hit. And I was always thankful that there was a teacher nurse to address the concerns of the students and give them appropriate terminology, et cetera, since I was the physical science teacher and not in the human body sense. So I just felt like, and it's all based on state standards. I especially like the teen violence and the unhealthy relationship piece that starts coming in there, because that goes both ways, male and female. And, as a classroom teacher, sometimes all you need is a little help for them to identify that, then they can come to you. It was always a plus. I'm just curious, we go 4th through 12th grade pretty much. How many nurses do we have doing all this? Because I know scheduling, yes, nightmare.
It is a nightmare. We're hoping that we have fixed this, or we'll be fixing it. What happened is we had 2 sets of nurses. We have the Department of Health's nurses, and we have the school board nurses. In the past, the Department of Health took care of all clinic things. With some exceptions, we helped them out in some ways. But our nurses, which were at the time, the last count was 10. We now, because of COVID, have 15. Our 15 nurses would then go, or 10 at the time, would go and do all of the education. And you're right, it was a nightmare. So, but what we've decided to do is to blend our programs together so that we have more nurses. So instead of the 10, now 15, we now have 15 plus another 10 or 12 from the health department, and they have fewer schools, so they can schedule them more readily throughout the school year, because they will be responsible for both, they are responsible for both the school clinics, overseeing them, and school health in the school, as well as these lessons. So it just makes sense that they become really integrated into their schools. And so that was our plan. We started that initiative this year, and it has been growing pains. I'm going to tell you, our RNs and the health department RNs are doing a fabulous job. They have gone from COVID to still COVID and adding in things. It's a totally new experience for them. And we will be pairing the ones that do not have as much experience in the educational field. We'll be pairing them with the ones who do, just like we had the ones in the clinics who had much more experience paired with some of our nurses who were learning that role.
Because if memory serves, as a classroom teacher, not only did I not really have a choice, because I knew y'all didn't have a choice as to when you came into my room, but also I was the one that had to collect the forms, check and make sure there was opt-out, and I think with this online, that would be very beneficial and not put that burden back on, the classroom instructor. And I can, in my head, I can hear 1,000 times the nurses that I work with, the only 100% prevention is abstinence. Like nothing else works, considering, 100%. So, yeah, kudos, yeah.
Ms. Miller.
I also had a question about the teen violence, the relationship violence, and human trafficking. That's something that's a popular topic now with the growth of the internet and students who are not supervised on the internet, and we cannot mandate supervision when they're not in front of us. So is that touched on in, I know that's a lot of mental health aspect to it. Does the DOE require that anywhere else, or is that just as needed per situation at school is identified? Because I would think that the mental health support, or for providing some kind of training on that aspect of what it looks like in relation to internet bullying / violence in another area in the curriculum, it would be important.
Right, they do, you start to see where they start coinciding all, and they interweave together to form a tapestry of some sort. By statute, we're required to teach about trafficking. We do so in several ways. This is one way. Another way is through we have internet safety that has to be done every year as well. And that is not through my department, that's through oh goodness. It's Barry's department, it just kind of left me for a minute. And it also has components in there for human trafficking as well. We're trying to spread it out so it hits as many kids as we possibly can, as many times as we can. But for right now, it's between these areas that you've seen and Ms. Barry's area with the online information. Another thing you have to think about with human trafficking, it's not just about, human trafficking is actually education that goes from K to 12. But you don't talk about human trafficking with a kindergartner. You talk about good touch, bad touch. You talk about ways to go to your parent if something bad is happening or it makes you uncomfortable. That's what you talk about there. In 6th grade, we have another section where it's part of it's not technically human trafficking, but it does lend to it. It is absolutely internet safety, identifying people who may be perpetrators, identifying what they do, how they groom a student, how they may lure you away from your family by making you think different things. That's in the 6th grade as part of that curriculum. So we do try to interweave them through our mental health as well, so they have a better understanding, and it becomes commonplace for them to think about this.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen?
Superintendent, hi, thank you. I have an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old in the household. This has been beneficial. I might take some of those PowerPoints, and I can see myself in the family room leading a PowerPoint discussion with the TV in the background. Probably not. So yeah, thanks for clarifying. In the back of my mind, I was just thinking of the parental rights law that was passed last year, HB 241. So, I think we're addressing a couple of things that are noted in that law as it relates to where the place these are going to be. It's supposed to be on our homepage, so I appreciate that clarification. I was curious on timing because, and the transparency is great. Thank you so much. And we'll vote on this tonight to public notice this, and then it'll come back in our next meeting, correct? So will we see that access point, can you give me a sense of timing of when that would take place so parents could see it and access it to then give some feedback on the content?
Sure. So the website is currently in development. The team is working on it. I believe we could probably have it up and active no later than Friday. It may be sooner than that. It's not a very complicated process, and so all of these attachments will be loaded in there as drafts. I think that's important. Or we can include anything that's in there that was previously approved by the board, with the understanding that, again, several topics will continue to be addressed. So, yes.
Great, thanks. Then second question, and you noted this was a question I had to pose, and you noted it in the presentation that the content is annually reviewed and then edited. So thanks for that clarification as well. And I'm curious, as we receive this content, next year, can we see what's been modified? And a lot of times, I'll see a document that we can track the changes that were made, would be beneficial. I'm not sure if that is being done currently.
Well, we actually had discussed that about, okay, for now next year, how is this going to look? So you don't have to go through every single thing again, but making a front page that still would have everything available, because we would need to make sure everybody can see that. But a front page of these are the changes that you will find throughout the document or throughout the curriculum, so that you can quickly find them or just read that and then you would know.
Okay.
Most of the changes are indicated by the state, so there would be a change in the standard or benchmark. And so the only other changes would result from the committee that initially puts together the presentations that they may find that we need to provide further clarification. So one of the changes that we'll make sure that we reference here, and as was referenced earlier, in several of the grade levels, we provide students with information as to who they can contact if they have questions or they find themselves in a difficult situation. But we'll also go back and make sure we continue to reemphasize that their primary contact should be their parent. So those are some of those revisions. So you might see a red line, strike through redacted version, but just to be aware that unless the state mandates a change or we make a decision at the local level to modify further, there may not be changes each subsequent year. But it is brought back as part of the adoption cycle process so that it can be reviewed and approved annually as required.
Yeah, great, thanks. And you mentioned a committee. So there's a committee that reviews the materials annually?
Well, yes, we have a little committee in the Mark Wilcox Center who reviews it annually, because the structure was set up many years ago. So when we review it, mostly we're reviewing for updated statistics, things like that are just sliding into what has already been in existence. So it wasn't a full committee looking at the curriculum, because that was originally done. But it doesn't mean that Mr. Hyde could direct us in any way he chooses, or the board, if you so choose, and we would be happy to accommodate anything that you would like us to do. And you would like to say something?
So to his question, could you share who was a party to that initial development of the content? Who participated in that larger
Sure.
committee?
Jamie knows the history, and it's a long history.
It is. It goes back a long way. Back in our original program that was developed, and I will say in the mid-'80s to 86, 87, a task force was created from district individuals, community individuals, physicians, and they came up with a curriculum. After the curriculum was initiated or actually put out there to say this is what we want to do, there were some concerned community groups, parents that had some concerns about some areas of the curriculum. They reconvened. They went in and tweaked, if you will, the curriculum. They came to a common consensus of what would be in the curriculum and what would not be in the curriculum, came up with a new curriculum that was implemented in the 1988 school year. At that point in time is when a nurse was hired to then coordinate and go forward to coordinate and go forward with the curriculum, to adopt these changes, to make sure that we were on target with the changes, and that has been in place ever since. Yearly reviews were done back in that time for the board, but then because we kept with the framework over and over again and then just made general changes about that, updating statistical information, updating things like that. We were given permission through the board not to bring it back every year for that type of thing, but unless we had a major change of structure of sorts, that we could continue to make our yearly updates and implement those types of changes. That is my understanding through these years that I have been there. It has become new now that this new legislation, that now we are going back to bringing it to the board for, to review and to look at it. That's been a different procedural thing for us, really re-implementing what was originally done. And so that's where we are with that. I don't know if that answers the question appropriately or not with it, but that's how it goes. I did want to mention something. What is not new, it appears new, but it's not new, is for the parents' ability to preview and to look at the materials. That has always been the option for the parents. Before we stand in front of the classroom to teach, those letters go out to let the parents know, these are the lessons, this is what we're teaching and when we're teaching the lessons. Unless there's just some tornado or something that happens, we generally, go forward for that time frame calendar event. It's also notifying parents and giving them the option to contact us and to look at the lessons. We would sit down with them. Many times we would go to open house, and allow them to look at the information and allow them to look at the curriculum, ask us questions, and all that sort of thing. So the ability to preview and look at the information is not a new thing. Now, we've not posted it to the website, but we have always made that an option for the parents, and always made it for an option for them to opt out of the instruction should they so choose. So I want to make sure that that's communicated.
Thank you.
Thanks for the history and the context there.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There are 2 items under informational items for the board. The first is financial statement for the period ending October 31st, 2021. Ms. Heather Jenkins is present, although this was included as an informational item for your review. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to bring Ms. Jenkins forward. Seeing none. The second item under information was the donation report. This shows any donations or contributions that were made to the district or to specific schools. And it provides a highlight as to the who, the how much, and what specifically the donation was for. Ms. Miller.
I just have a question on the donation, for information on the school donation list.
Ma'am?
There are several donations that are listed for the Hearth program under exceptional student education. That's not a school. So is that for Hearth students who need support services, or specifically for those students?
I would not have the answer to that. I'd have to defer to Mr. Lutz and/or to Ms. Jenkins. And Dr. Lutz is not with us here today, so I'll have to get you a follow-up response to that.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend our community for stepping forward and helping out our schools. It's really incredible to see the number of gifts and the dollar value of gifts that we see coming into our schools, and it's just a real, I think just a great thing on the part of our community. But I do have a question for Mr. Bridges. At one time, we voted on accepting the gifts that came into the school district. Are we not required to do that anymore, Mr. Bridges?
I will look and see. I know that they're presented to this, they've been presented, but I'm not sure whether we're required to vote on the consent agenda or not. I will check on that for you.
Well, I recall when I was, previously, they appeared on the consent agenda, and we,
Correct. They appeared there
just
and
appeared there.
were approved
as part of the
as a,
consent agenda.
yeah, just as a matter of routine.
And
I'll look at the requirement.
I asked that question for this reason. I'm wondering if a gift came before us and was perhaps not an appropriate gift and we somehow missed it, if that would be considered an oversight on the part of the board.
I'll be happy to look at that and make
Thank
sure
you.
we're operating, coloring inside the lines.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
So as a follow-up to that, according to Ms. Winchester, there is board policy that deferred the responsibility, or excuse me, not the responsibility, the right to the superintendent's office to accept donations on behalf of schools or school district. That has been our process, but we can bring that board policy forward for review if that's so, if that's the interest.
No, I mean, I'm not asking for that to happen. I'm fine with that policy. I was just curious because we haven't, at one time it was on the consent agenda, we did vote on it, we're not doing that
I am
now.
very accustomed to this being a monthly topic, a monthly item, quite honestly, so the board can see what donations are being made.
Sure.
For two reasons. Obviously, fiscal transparency, you want to make sure that we're tracking those dollars. It's important. And really, number two, equally important, is acknowledging these people on an ongoing basis rather than one comprehensive list that's being reviewed here in real time. So both of those are very valid points, or your concern is, or your question is a valid one. So I can definitely speak with staff about modifying it to a monthly basis. Ms. Could you come forward and be on the mic, please? Thank you.
The donations for the Hearth program are for the students that are graduating. It's for the students that participate in the Hearth program that are graduating. So it's to buy items for them.
Under school name, it says exceptional student education.
Yes, ma'am, that's just a category because the Hearth program falls under, it's a different aspect. Rather than general education, it falls under the ESE umbrella.
Okay, now that I understand that, the public, I would just wanted to make sure this is for all students in the
Yes,
Hearth
ma'am.
program.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I wanted the public to be able to understand that, the way it's listed. And I also like the idea of getting this more frequently. Other than my high schools kind of letting me know sometimes, because Auburndale is one that receives a lot of donations because of the community support. As a board member, you know, when we have these people coming back and some of these faith-based organizations, I like to thank them for what they're doing. So if we could get this more frequently.
Yeah, Ms. Winchester has confirmed we can provide this on a monthly basis. The question that I'll pose and I'll work through with Ms. Wyatt is, will we leave it in workshop or will we go ahead and add it to the board meeting under consent? So we can discuss that at our next meeting.
Thank you.
I'm not entirely sure when that change was made, but we'll look at it.
That concludes my presentations for today.
Thank you. And I am going to switch things so that we do the committee assignments first, since we have, part of that is on our agenda. So I will pass these out. So luckily, you guys made it fairly easy in that everybody wanted the different assignments. So there were only two that were not on somebody's list, but I'll just go down the list. So for audit and finance, Lori Cunningham. Sales tax oversight, Kay Fields. Polk County Head Start, Kay Fields. Polk Education Foundation, Lisa Miller. Calendar Committee, Lisa Miller. Academics, William Allen. Financial Committee, Lynn Wilson. Facilities and Operations, Sarah Fortney. And then for our board liaisons, Sarah Fortney for the Central Florida School Board Coalition. The FSBA Board of Directors and the Advocacy are both currently appointed through June 30th of 2022. And so that will continue to be Sarah Fortney and Lisa Miller alternate for the Board of Directors. And then myself with Lisa Miller alternate for Advocacy. Junior Achievement will be Dr. Allen. And then we have some that we have to vote on. So the Polk County Value Adjustment Board is voted on by the board. Lynn Wilson indicated that he was interested. So I'd like to recommend that we make him the board member for that appointment. And then we do need an alternate. So if anybody is interested in serving as the alternate, and that will come up at the meeting tonight for a vote. Is anyone interested in serving as the alternate, or would you like to nominate someone else to serve as the alternate? Yes, Mr. Wilson?
The meetings don't occur that often, but it is important, it's imperative to have a board member there. So rarely have I not been able to make the meetings, but in the case that I not be able to be there, it's important to have somebody that can fill in.
Thank you. Ms. Fortney?
Where do the meetings take place, Mr. Williams?
At the Board of County Commissioners building, what is that, the, yeah, the Board of County Commissioners building.
In Bartow?
In
Used to be
Bartow.
the Neil Combie
Yes.
building, I think. Not in the
I
courthouse.
can do the alternate.
All right.
That would be
we will ha-
convenient if you could not make it, since I can
You're right
get there
there.
quick.
All right. So if you guys can get it updated for the motion for the agenda, it will be Lynn Wilson for the member and then Sarah Fortney for the alternate. The other one is the Polk Vision Board of Directors, which this came up 2 years ago because Polk Vision has changed their bylaws to make their appointments for 2 years to get a little bit of consistency from year to year so that you don't get somebody in and then by the time they figure out what's going on, they roll off the board. So those were appointed last year with myself on the board of directors and then Ms. Miller on the operating board. So this will be year 2 of 2. But we do need to confirm at the board meeting tonight the appointment for the Polk Vision Board of Directors. Does anybody have any questions on appointments? Everybody all right?
I just want to make a statement. I will miss Head Start. I'll just say it out loud. All right.
I'm sorry, Ms. Fortney.
I do whatever is the best for the board.
I will just, for a little bit of disclosure, as I went through, if there were any that multiple people wanted, I looked at who had served on the committee before, because my belief is that what's best for students is that as many of our board members as possible know what's going on in each of these committees. So if you listed that you wanted to do Head Start or PEF and you had served before, even if it was your top choice, you may not have gotten it because somebody else put it as their top choice and they've never gotten to see that aspect of what we do. So it's just important to me that everybody gets the opportunity to see what all of our great committees are doing. So thank you all for being willing to serve on committees, because I know it can be time consuming, but it's going to be a great year.
Oh, and I also noticed I'm back on Central Florida School Board Coalition. And
Believe
we're
it or
starting,
not-
we're
believe it or
starting
not,
to meet
Ms.
face to
Fortney.
face, so I get to go to Orlando once a month.
You are the
Yay.
only one that put that down on your sheet again this
I
year.
knew that. Trying to read your minds there, Beth.
But I greatly appreciate you doing it, so I didn't have to bully anyone else into it. All right, so we'll now go over the agenda for this evening. We have a student from Chain of Lakes doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Call to order, acceptance of the agenda. Any concerns, Section A? Section B is our special recognitions. I believe Lisa Miller is stepping down for those. Public comments, approval of the minutes. Section D. Any concerns on consent agenda? Sections E through P. And I believe Nearpod is being pulled from the agenda. Is that correct, Superintendent Hyde?
Correct. There are 2 items that will be pulled from the agenda, and I was going to provide an explanation for each at the start of the next meeting. If you'd like me to do it here, I'm more than happy to.
If you could at least just let us know what those are, that would
Yes,
be
ma'am.
helpful.
So item K7, under Facilities, Middle School addition to Bellicita Elementary School. And then item P2, under Teaching and Learning, and that's Nearpod.
And those are not being pulled indefinitely. They'll come back to us at a later date.
Those
Is
will
that
come
correct?
back in
Okay.
January.
Right, and-
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask that item P1 be pulled from the consent agenda and be placed on the regular agenda, since it will be necessary for me to abstain from that vote.
Thank you. And Wendy, you're good with that? Thank you, ma'am. All right. And action items, Q1 through 3. Q4 is the one that's our financial meeting, correct, Mr. Bridges?
Yes, ma'am. And one thing I would note is that while it shows up on the agenda as 1, 2, 3, 4 items under a single heading, the Resolution 7 is in fact one that is passed by the board, sitting as the Board of Directors for the Finance Corporation. So you'll want to recess the board meeting, call the Finance Corporation to order, adopt that resolution, then adjourn that, come back to the school board meeting. It is an identical motion, but the school board sits in both capacities.
Okay. So any questions on Q4 and the financial committee meeting? Any questions on 5 and 6? Those are the appointments that we just discussed for board, Polk Vision and the Value Adjustment Board. And the policy updates, I've asked Superintendent Hyde to have Ms. Dodge ready to speak to each of those. And we will vote on each of the policy updates individually so that we can get a little bit of clarification at the beginning before public comment, and then we'll have our discussion on it after public comment for each one.
Is there any way to ask a couple quick questions about that
Of
now?
course.
With Ms. Dodge?
Superintendent Hyde.
Ms. Dodge?
I believe it was the fourth benefits revised.
The support staff or the administrative staff
Administrator.
benefits?
Hang on, I'm scrolling. On K, can you explain the reason for the cross-out? I just didn't, normally I get all this clarified prior, but I didn't have time this time. I apologize.
That's fine. What we're doing here in these policies is aligning them with the changes we've made to our sick leave policies, which is where we are removing any caps that for payout that would be limited to a salary, to somebody, 50% of someone's salary. So when we made the original changes, we added this language that's now being struck out, where we say, refer to any limits for payout may be based on annual salary, and that aligns in each policy. We've made the changes in the administrative policy, and then the administrative benefits policy, and then the support staff policy, which impacts non-union employees and professional technical,
Right, I read
and
that.
the associated benefits for the same employee group.
You're reverting back to original language. When the board decided to implement a cap previously, you added, to Ms. Dodge's point, you added this language, and so now that we're reverting back to the original
Okay.
process, we're just deleting any language that was added at that time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's still beneficial for administrators, et cetera?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
Gotcha. That's my main concern.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. That was it.
Question on that. When this policy, if we vote on it tonight and goes forward, how do we communicate that out to our staff? So,
Rest
specifically, I'm
assured,
thinking
they are
the-
very much aware of this policy recommendation.
All 82 of those?
Well,
84.
as it relates specifically to sick leave and the revisions there, the rest goes out either in a weekly newsletter or we can provide other informational updates. But as it relates to several of these, they are very aware of what's taking place.
Indeed.
Ms. Dodge, would you like to explain how else we communicate updates?
I believe, Mr. Hyde, those are the only communications that I'm aware of. So unless Mr. Pitts has something to add.
Sorry, just to jump up here.
Oh.
I can tell you because I saw it 3
Communication to
places.
send out to all
Very
employees.
nice.
Back when we changed the sick leave policy payout back in February, I still don't think many employees are aware of that benefit. So we are working on some language to sell the benefits of working for the district, and this will be included here very soon, and some communication.
But I
very
think
soon.
your greater question is, when we have policy changes, how do we communicate those to staff? And they do go out in weekly updates or summaries that we provide to them. There's still no assurance. Sometimes people get to policy updates. It's just like email, and we skip to the next section.
Yep.
However, the information is there, and we can provide regular updated information as questions come in.
Yep. And I think I was asking that question specifically related to this one. And I'm surprised of how many teachers were still unaware of that policy change that we made for teachers. And, I think our admins are very excited about this policy change as well. So-
Yeah, and it's one of those benefits that really gets unspoken of. It doesn't get spoken to, more importantly. When we look at insurance, when we look at vacation and leave, and we look at benefits such as this, as Mr. Pitts pointed out, these are going to become aggressive bullet points as we continue to go out for recruitment and retention initiatives moving forward, because these are really important, as we talked about last time, and they go unsung. And quite honestly, when you calculate this benefit long-term to an employee, inclusive of fully paid, no contribution to insurance and other factors, we are very competitive. It may not look like it directly on the salary line, but when you include all these additional benefits, we are very competitive. And that's going to become more of an aggressive marketing campaign that Brian and his team in HR are going to are taking up at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dodge.
Thank
Any
you,
other
Ms. Dodge.
questions on policy updates before Ms. Dodge leaves? All right.
Thanks, Ms.
Thank
Dodge.
you, Ms. Dodge. Okay, and we'll have the superintendent's report and attorney report, and it looks like we have one motion to advertise for the reproductive health curriculum under his report. Ms. Matthews, do you have a report tonight?
Not tonight.
Thank you. And then we will have board member reports and then public comment. Any questions? Everybody good? All right. Okay, so I have a few things before we move to board member comments. Just kind of some updates from the chair role. The first is we had a great meeting last week on strategic planning with myself, Superintendent Hyde, and Kim Long. Kim will be reaching out to set up individual meetings with individual board members for the beginning of January. So as she reaches out to you, please make yourself available at some point in the first couple weeks of January to speak with her. It will be fairly similar to what we've done before with Mr. Frejo, but just kind of being able to gauge individual board members' perceptions of the strategic planning process. Linda recently shared, or is getting ready to share, the board protocol examples that Carol Cook shared with us from our last board retreat. They're all in one PDF, but if you go to the bookmarks, it's bookmarked that there's 5 different protocols. So I just shared those for you all to be able to review. And as we move forward in our board retreats, we'll look towards how we're going to be able to incorporate some protocols into what we do here. The January 11th work session, I believe that Superintendent Hyde shared this morning that we are looking to add a special board meeting immediately following the work session. It's a very light agenda that morning, but we have the opportunity to approve the PEA's contract, which if we're able to do it then they'll be able to see those funds on the January paycheck, which I know is very important and exciting for all of our staff. So we will be having a very short special board meeting right at the end of our work session on January 11th.
And to that point, if I could provide a
Yes.
clarification. So we will review the workshop agenda for that day. If it appears that we will not need to be here till noon, we will modify the advertisement to abbreviate the workshop duration so we can immediately publish the subsequent meeting. So the goal is to have you out of here by noon, which is your current commitment for that workshop day. So I will work with Ms. Winchester and Ms. Wyatt to make sure that we can stay within the constraints of your already anticipated schedules.
Thank you. You will be receiving an email from either Linda or Yvette later this week for our evaluations for Ms. Matthews and Mr. Bridges. If you remember, in March, April, we did the evaluations for the 2019-2020 school year for all of our staff to catch up. And then we never went back and did the 2020-2021 school year. So the only staff members currently that we evaluate that were here during that time was Mr. Bridges and Ms. Matthews. So when you get these evaluations, remember it's not for the past 6 months. It's going back to the past 2020 to 2021, so last school year during the pandemic. I know it's a blur, but we still need to evaluate them and make sure that they're up to date. Coordinating staff time off, this came up at our retreat, but I just want to make sure that I know what the pleasure of the board is. As I've been meeting with them, basically kind of the general consensus was we just want to do what the board wants us to do, and we don't know what that is. I know some people have indicated, I don't need to know when staff is gone. Other people have said, I just want to know that you're out of the office. I know for me, I just want to know not to call you and bother you because you're on vacation. So if anyone has any thoughts or just kind of wants to give any thoughts on what you would prefer, whether that's, I know a couple of years ago, we sent out every Monday, it was, Miss Matthews is in the office this week. Yvette will be out on Tuesday, just kind of an overview of the week. I don't know what is most helpful for all of you, but I'm happy to do whatever the board would appreciate.
I'm with you, Sarah Beth. I don't like to interrupt them if they're on a vacation day or whatever, so, but, and who to contact, that's the other thing. As long as I know who to contact, I'm, like if I needed to talk to Wes. Although he's already said it doesn't really matter what he's doing, so. And I think that's kind of the general consensus, but I
Right.
still
But
hate
does
to
his wife
interrupt.
agree with that?
Accustomed to the notion that board member questions percolate to the surface on Sundays and holidays.
That's because we get bombarded on Saturdays.
Ms. Miller?
My input would be what Ms. Forney said, yes, who to contact, and I don't need to know why. I don't need to know, I feel like it's a little invasive to say my daughter is sick and I have to be, I think professionally, this person's in the office or they're not, and if they're not, here's who you contact. I feel like it's asking them too much to explain why they're gone to 7 different people.
Yeah, so is like a weekly, this is where everybody is is that helpful, or what is?
I will defer to what is useful and helpful to the staff. If that's something they're comfortable managing, that would be fine.
Okay.
So following our last meeting where this was discussed, I put out an email to the 3 employees of the board saying this is not coming from me as superintendent because I'm not Mr. Bridges' supervisor, right? And nor am I the auditor's supervisor. But at the time, the board expressed an appreciation for my having notified you if I was going to be out of the office. I do so just because I believe it's respectful, and quite honestly, emergencies happen all the time. And so your ability to contact me or know that I'm out of the office and who my designee is important for you. At the time, the board expressed an interest in having others do that, so I shared that with the other parties. So I don't think I was ever under the impression you were asking for the why, or that there was a calendar we were going to have to complete. It's just, I just, and I'm sorry if I poked this beehive on this one. It's just simply a matter of how I was mentored. I think it's respectful to tell you as my employers if I'm not going to be in the office. We ask the same thing of our teachers. We ask the same thing of parents when they call their children in sick. I think it's a reasonable expectation. So that's, from my perspective, I'll give the board as little or as much information as you want. But very much to Mr. Bridges' point, as soon as this was invented, you're 24/7 anyways, no matter what, so.
Okay, well, I will continue to ask, and I've talked to staff about this already, so this is not anything super surprising to them. But I'll continue to ask that they send out an email saying, I will be out of the office. Those sometimes get sent out way in advance, so we'll start to work on just having something sent out Monday. Just a reminder, these people are out, this is their designee, so you'll have it close to your fingertips if you need somebody.
Yeah, as far as Superintendent Hyde, like who is in charge, which we would assume, obviously, is Mr. Green. But, I really don't contact, if I call Wes Bridges, he knows I need to talk to him. I don't call him just to chat.
Absolutely.
I'm more in need of Linda and Yvette because they operate that office, so.
Thank you. All right. Just a request to bear with me this evening. We will be voting for ourselves and board docs tonight. We're going to try it again, but we'll get there. So just as a reminder, it pops up on your screen, and you click yay or nay. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it does take a second for it to sync. So Wendy and I are learning together, so just please be patient with us tonight as we learn together. the Chairmanship Academy at the FSBA conference was a great tool. And I know a couple others were there, but one of the things that we got, and I think everybody that was there brought back lots of handouts of the same thing, was the Parliamentary Motions Guide, which I know there was some questions before about Robert's Rules of Orders, and just how we're doing certain things. So I had Yvette make copies of our front and back quick cheat sheet for you all to be able to peruse as well. One of, I think, the most interesting things I learned was that for school boards, you cannot abstain unless you have a reason to abstain. You are supposed to vote on every motion. So even if you get up and go to the restroom during a motion and come back, we're actually supposed to ask what your vote was for the record, which was interesting to me because we've never practiced that before. But it was very beneficial, so thank you for sending me. Just an update from the Polk County Efficiency Commission. They are doing their efficiency study this year. Part of that is that the school board chair serves on the nominating committee, so that will get started next week. So if you see that in the news, we are represented. I also had Linda forward, this is next topic, also had Linda forward an email from the FSBA Advocacy Committee today. There is currently a House resolution in Washington that is House Resolution 5984, and it's dealing with IDEA funding. So they shared it asking to please contact your legislators and make sure it right now has bipartisan support, but it would be funding for up to 10 years. So, and Lisa can answer way more questions about that than I can because that's her sweet spot. So the last thing is just moving forward, I'd like to use the board comments during the work session as kind of a committee reports and updates for each of our board members. So if you've been to a conference, if you're serving on a committee, and we don't necessarily need to know every nitty-gritty detail that happened the entire committee meeting you went to, but it would be nice to hear back some highlights of, this is really, really cool. I know sometimes for your Orlando meetings that they have great ideas brought from different counties. So anything that you would like to share from your committees, I just would like to make sure that we're, part of the point of serving as liaisons is to bring that information back and make sure that the board's aware too. So with that, we'll move on to board member comments. So does anyone have any board member comments? Ms. Miller.
I just want to touch really quickly on that House bill. This is something that Mr. Wilson's talked about, and I've probably talked it to death. IDEA is the funding that comes in from the bill from the law from the 70s that said children with disabilities have the rights to be in your school. The federal government was supposed to fund it at 40%. It has never been funded over about 16 and currently sits at about 14%. So what happens is the students are the free and appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment is the law. Districts are juggling to do that with limited funding. The bipartisan effort in 2017 made progress, and we're hoping the bipartisan effort in this year will make progress. We have to have that funding. We are not serving students well. I know I'm a board member and I'm not supposed to say things that are negative. It's very difficult to serve students well with such limited funds. We're doing the best we can, and I think we do an outstanding job, especially the teachers who are being asked to do more and more every year to make sure that happens, and the support staff. But the fact is the funding's not there. It's not being misappropriated. It's not coming in. And so this is important for the community to reach out and really talk about the importance of this. Your child might not have a disability, but they're affected by students not receiving services or having to stretch supports very thin to provide services. So I just want to say that we can help, maybe at one point on our website, we had like a legislative liaison kind of page for community members. I don't know where that went. I would like to see that updated because this is one that it's very important to a lot of us. And it's just a page that gives information. It doesn't give opinions, but it would link you to the bills and things that are in session. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Any other board members? Dr. Allen?
Yeah, so, changing up the way that we do our comments, I really appreciate that. So it sort of refocuses maybe where I'd want to put my comments during work session, so I appreciate that. Reflecting back on the half-cent sales tax oversight committee, Eddie Twyford is now moving into the chair role, and, I forget, vice chair, just nominated and voted on. But Mr. Twyford was really speaking to the possibility and the interest in taking a more active role in creating, categories of value and what to pursue. And I thought that was pretty inquisitive and a good value on his part, rather than just be a committee that's rubber stamping things that are moving forward. Reflecting on some of the academic conferences, right, as that was a point of conversation. I had a chance to attend a couple different academic conferences within the last couple weeks, Excel and Ed, and then the joint conference. And as a new board member, I'm just valuing those things. I know that Ms. Forney, she's just got this, really long credentialed thing that she wears when she goes to this conference, and all the hours
It's like a
and
general.
board certifications. And so I've got a long ways to go as the newbie. But wanted to say thanks to Wendy Dodge, just allowing for me as the new board member, just to bridge that and navigate those territories. And then I was really, affirmed. We're sitting on a Friday morning joint session at the FSBA joint conference, and it was pretty well attended that early, very first session Friday morning. And then Wes Bridges shows up on the agenda, and had a chance to come up and speak. And as someone that's representing Polk, he spoke with such eloquence. So early in the morning, had them rolling with some laughter, and just spoke very well as he did a presentation on the Past President Award. So Wes, I appreciate your words and eloquence, and just bringing some humor on that early Friday morning. But you represented us so well, so thank you.
Ms. Fortney?
Yes, Dr. Allen, my goal is to get you an even longer ribbon list, because it is very, when you go to those FSBA conferences, and especially the joint conference, I learned so much, Lord of mercy. And just to get to network with other folks and ideas, which kind of brings me to the Central Florida Public School Boards Coalition, just to put this out in the open, we are, the purpose of that is to address public education issues, share best practices, and they're going to start something new this year. Each district will have an opportunity to share an effective initiative at each of our meetings. So I wanted y'all to start thinking about what you would like for me to bring to that, meeting. And then I would like to ask our team to help me develop that, whatever that is. And I, too, want to thank Wendy Dodge. Wendy Dodge knows everybody at these conferences. It's like walking with a rock star. Yeah. And, she just has so much insight on how things actually operate. One thing, though, I think when Mr. Bridges was there, that wasn't Friday morning. That was the, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. Wake up, Wes. What day was it?
It's Thursday.
I think it was
I believe
Thursday.
that was on the Wednesday morning.
Yeah,
Wow.
because Friday we had a student panel.
Right.
And I know you had other commitments, but I actually sent Mr. Hyde some of that documentation, the student panels, and some of their, what they ran on to sit on that panel. It's a statewide group of kids. I think it's student council. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, but it's a statewide student council. But they have to run for that position, and they each had their platform, and it was stuff that was things that we don't, as adults, sometimes think about. That is very important to our students, and they're our student leaders. So I sent those attachments to Mr. Hyde, one of which I have asked about since I got elected back in 2018, which is having a student representative on the board. And I'm going to keep asking, and I think this young man provided a very good platform to make that a reality. He's already done the work. So I just wanted to say that, and that's it. If we're doing committees, I appreciate that, Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you, Ms. Fortney. And Mr. Hyde, maybe we can bring that forward in a work session at some point about what it would look like to have a student representative, whether it's an annual, if it just kind of what it would look like. I think that's something that there's interest in. It keeps coming back up, so which tells me that there might be interest. But thank you. Anyone else? All right, and that concludes our work session. I believe we have a grievance hearing at 3 o'clock, correct? So we'll be
That's
back
correct.
here at 3 p.m.